joining me here now on the Rich Eisen Show, a sports lawyer. He writes for Sports Illustrated, did a great article. One of the things that I read on the plane last night, that's why I wanted to have him here on the Rich Eisen Show. Michael McCann, how are you, sir?
I'm doing great, Rich. Thanks for having me on.
So let's start macro. As a whole, reading this Wells report, Don Yee, the agent of Tom Brady, attacked it as a legal document. How would you read it as a legal document?
Yeah, it is a legal document. It was a document created by lawyers hired by the NFL. It is not objective in the sense that a neutral party investigated and a neutral party wrote the report. So I think it's fair of Don Yee to highlight that there are certain possibilities of bias in this report, a report that directs most of the blame, as far as I can tell, onto a player rather than onto an owner or a coach. So it's fair to say that, although that critique doesn't undermine some of the points in the report, because the report still has text messages allegedly sent by Brady that certainly don't look good for him. But I think it is correct of Don Yee to highlight a point that while the NFL calls this independent and neutral, it isn't. When you hire lawyers to do something, they're advocates for you. They're not going to be neutral.
Michael McCann joining me here on the Rich Eisen Show. So it did seem to me, though, that the Wells report might have been led into this direction of giving their summary in the way that they did by the fact that they couldn't speak to McNally a second time and Brady didn't cough up his phone. And those are two things that they hammered over and over again in the report. When you are making an investigative legal document like this, can that affect your judgment in an executive summary like the one that they spit out yesterday?
Yeah, it can. And I think, to be honest, I wish the report had noted that Brady could have been under orders by the NFLPA not to cooperate. We know that the NFLPA directed Patriots players not to immediately speak with investigators or the NFL in the aftermath of the first instance of the Deflategate story. It's very possible that Brady was directed by the NFLPA not to turn over his phone. It's also possible his lawyer told him not to. And it's possible he has materials on it that he didn't want to share. You know, the NFL has had a number of leaks in recent months, and while Wells and the NFL can claim that nothing would have been shared publicly, I mean, that's not a full assurance. So I think while it's fair to reason that Brady's unwillingness to share his phone is suspicious, I think to me it should also be noted that he would have had valid reasons to do so, even if there's nothing suspicious on the phone.
Michael McCann of Sports Illustrated joining me here on the Rich Eisen Show. Explain for those listening and watching this show right now what more probable than not means from a lawyer.
So it's the standard used in civil trials where in a civil case, if you're in a car crash, you sue someone, it's more likely than not. That's the key. Anything greater than 50%. It is arguably a pretty low threshold. It isn't like a criminal trial where it's beyond a reasonable doubt. It isn't the sort of midway standard called clear and convincing. It basically creates a burden where if your instinct is the person probably did it, that can be enough to find them at fault. So the report, and in fairness to the report, that is the standard that's used in these investigations. So the choice of that standard isn't wrong, but it's really a low bar, especially when the conclusion is he may have had general awareness. I don't know what that means, general awareness. If you're generally aware, it doesn't mean you knew something. It doesn't mean you intended something. It could actually be pretty low. It doesn't mean Brady shouldn't be held at fault, but that's not a high bar to convict someone, if you will.
Well, what about if you're a commissioner needing to figure out discipline? What bar is more probable than not hit for you if you're the NFL trying to figure out what to do now with this report?
Yeah, I mean, I think the NFL can choose whatever bar it wants on some level because it is in the hands of the commissioner, and the commissioner could now say the Wells report, which the commissioner is going to call independent, concluded that Brady likely is at fault for at least being generally aware of others doing something wrong. To me, that's a tenuous finding of fault. I don't personally think it warrants some of the penalties that I've heard proposed by others. And also I think it's worth noting this is not a major rule that was violated. I know this is a major story, but the rule itself only carries a penalty of $25,000. So let's say Brady knew that others on the team were intentionally breaking a rule that carries a $25,000 penalty. Does he really deserve a multi-game suspension? I think he probably deserves a fine.
That's Michael McCann of Sports Illustrated right here on the phone. So what your article that you wrote on this last night ran through what Tom Brady's options are. Can you run through for the listeners and viewers of the show right now what Brady's options are right now outside of his agent going all guns a-blazing on the NFL and the Wells report?
Yeah, you got it, Rich. So the first option would be just to say he did it, that he accepts the conclusions in the report. He says he's sorry. That ends the story. Maybe he gets suspension, but people would possibly applaud him for being honest or owning up to something. I don't think that's going to happen. His agent's comments, his dad's comments suggest that's not going to be the tactic. And also, if he were to do that, he would be called a cheater. I mean, the rest of his career, he would be owning up to doing something that's wrong. Even if that's an overstatement of a label, it would be associated with him. He could also simply say, I didn't do it, and I'm not going to talk about it anymore. He could say, look, I'm not here to answer questions about this. I didn't do it. I've had enough of this story. The league can do whatever it wants to do. I'm fine with it, but I'm not talking about this anymore. I didn't do it. This could arguably sort of the Mark McGuire, I'm not here to talk about the past defense. I don't think that worked too well for McGuire.
Nope.
I don't think it would work too well for Brady. So then you're left with, okay, blame the lawyers, blame the NFLPA. We talked about that earlier. They told him not to cooperate. He could say he had good legal reasons not to share his phone. There are privacy issues. You know, that may be that argument may work well with lawyers, but I think with fans, they're not going to be too responsive. They're going to say he's lawyered up. Then he could just go out and attack the Wells report. That's another option, is to say, and we've already seen some of this, right, that the report is biased, that it's incomplete, that Don Yee says that much of what Brady said isn't in the report. Attack the credibility of Ted Wells, go after the methods, look at the science, all of that stuff, a full frontal assault on the report itself. I have a feeling that's what they're going to do. That's my gut, is that they're going to really be aggressive. The last option is to sue the NFL, to sue Ted Wells, to pull a Jonathan Vilma and argue that it's defamation what's in the report. I don't think Brady's going to do that. It did kind of work for Vilma, though, because although his lawsuit failed, it helped him get his suspension overturned. Maybe Brady would get some traction by doing that. Problem there is he's a public figure, really hard to show that even if what's in the report is untrue, that it's intentionally untrue or it was made with knowledge. Very tough to show. Brady, to me, doesn't strike me as someone who's going to file a lawsuit, but that would be the sort of boldest, most aggressive move.
Last question for you, Michael McCann of Sports Illustrated. Troy Vincent's taking a look at this. Other folks in the league office will take a look at it. What do you think the lawyers in the room will tell the commissioner before he makes his decision?
I think the lawyers will tell him that this is a client that is arguably the most prominent NFL player, that the Players Association will fight more aggressively for this than any other suspension the NFL has given, I think. This is about the most popular person, arguably, in the NFL, you could say, at least on some level in terms of marketability, certainly one of the most. And that this is a player who has an owner who will fight for him. This is a player that will make I guess the question is, do you want to suspend him and deal with the fallout of suspending Tom Brady when you know his owner will resent you the rest of his career, your career as commissioner, you know Brady's agent, the team, the NFLPA will try to intervene? Do you want to go through like you're going through with Adrian Peterson and like you went through with Ray Rice? You really want to go down that path? My gut is the NFL doesn't. Could be wrong. I think they fine him.
Michael McCann, Sports Illustrated, thanks for calling in. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on.
You bet.
The Rich Eisen Show, weekdays at noon Eastern. On Audience.